Democratization. Yesterday we already had one panel on that format. I'm very glad today that we can be in person and not online. It's very different to have an audience. And I'm really looking forward to all of your questions and for interacting together with the wonderful panelists that we have today. Maybe a few words about the format itself. The idea behind this format was to really personalize what it means to have processes of democratization, because in any process of democratization there are biographies that are touched and there's personal stories that go along with it, and it's lives that are being touched by that. So we really wanted to shed light on that. And we have some very different stories and very different people who are going to talk today. Yesterday we talked to a poet and activist from Belarus who shared her story, and we talked to an Irish woman who was part of a citizens' assembly that legalized abortion in Ireland. And today we are going to be first talking to Sami Altsin. He works at the international online delivery service provider Just Eat Takeaway, and that includes Lieferando. He's going to talk about his story and make a statement, and later on I'm going to welcome him on stage to talk to me, and like I said, we welcome your questions and we hope to really have a conversation with all of you. So Semih, you're welcome.
Thank you very much. My name is Sami Altsin. I'm living and working in Cologne for Lieferando. I started 5 years ago. From tomorrow on, I guess it's 5 years exactly. And I started as courier. And it was because I lost my former job and saw a courier in front of me and said, okay, why not? For some months maybe. Yeah, and when I started work, I was a so-called high performer. The company reacted, hey, he's delivering great, he has great performances and KPIs, and I was promoted team lead. And after that, I get some insights how the office was run, and I realized nobody has a clue. Nobody felt responsible for health and safety at work. Couriers were tracked all the time. And other certain stuff like data protection or replying to courier feedback. And part of the fleet was under my command. That were 25 people, and I got feedback from them, hey, I had an accident, what should I do? With some other colleagues, because nobody was doing something, we founded a works council. That was in summer 2017. And then the real work began about working times and shift schedules, about processes for accidents, about unfair bonus systems, and so on and so on. From nowadays' point of view to the past, we already have some successes. For example, as we belong to Delivery Hero, we reached via agreement an equal representation on the supervisory board level, so that means half of the representatives from the shareholders and half are from employee sides. A defined quota for women, each side has to at least 30% be female, and we formed up something like in a European stock company, it's called SE Works Council. It's like a European Works Council to discuss certain matters on group level. Also, now our couriers get compensated with 30 cents per kilometer when they use their own bikes. We have risk assessment for health and safety measures implemented in different cities. We try to expand it over whole of Germany, maybe also as good example for other countries, and other certain topics like we want to introduce new bonus systems, and at the moment we are We have negotiations about our courier app. The Data Protection Authority is checking Just Eat Takeaway at the moment, so we can be very excited about the results in some months. Then we built up a tariff commission because the working conditions and the payment are so low. So we called for a campaign, Fight for 15 euros, as example in the US from US trade unions, and we want to increase payment for the riders. A big negative experience was I started working at Foodora, and this belonged to Delivery Hero. 2.5 years ago, they sold all the German business to takeaway.com, known as Lieferando. And the management thought, hey, these couriers in the work councils, what do they want from us? They don't know how we operate. They don't know our business. And why do they want information from us? Sure, we want information because we want to change something. And we want to change something in favor for our colleagues. But the management were not really convinced by our actions, so they mostly replied with written warnings, cut-off payments, and other measures like a cooperation agreement, it was called. It was part of a project called Takeaway Together. In fact, the content was we should abstain from co-determination rights, totally illegal. But we were, at this time, 2.5 years ago, only 2 works councils. And we tried to increase in numbers as a counter strategy. So at the we became 6 work councils. At the moment, we're even 8, and we're increasing in numbers because our colleagues want to change something. And with certain strategies in negotiation, court cases, collaboration boards, we forced the employer a bit. The employer reacted and said, next time when the elections take place, we will send in our own candidates. They did, but they lost. The employees don't let them fool themselves, and even not especially not the couriers who know really about this work and the conditions there. So to conclude this a bit, from my personal point of view even, what did happen actually? It was a real big experience for me. In the past with politics, I don't had anything to do. I did military service for 2 years, but there were budgets determined, plans executed, and so on. But I thought always this is far away from me. If I wouldn't run candidationship for work council and become employee representative, all these lessons learned would have stayed away from me. I didn't know that I can be such a badass in negotiations when it's about my colleagues, and the company didn't expect that too. And to conclude, actually, I just want to put it in a nutshell, 3 things that are really important if you want to change something or if you want to fight for your rights. It's first of all, you need a long breath. The counterpart is always stronger and bigger than you. They have more resources. Then the second one is we have laws, but there are people. The world is not run by laws, it's run by people. Some according to laws, some they do not. And the third one is actually, with all the lessons learned, is it's good to be active. Because if you are not active and do something, then others will decide for you. And they will not decide in your favor. And it's really an overwhelming feeling if you impose your own will on such big corporations. I really can recommend it for everyone.
Thank you, Sami, for this very interesting and entertaining little story. I mean, first of all, please, for the audience, if you have questions, please go ahead and raise your hand. I would like to start with one question from my side, because you were concluding just now in a really interesting way, but I was wondering, in this whole context of, you know, getting people together to really push for workers' rights. Was it easy to gather colleagues together? Because I think one of the problems in like these extremely capitalist companies is that workers are separated. I mean, especially with this food delivery, I just wonder, is it natural that people talk to each other? Is it natural that they bond quickly and that they, you know, support each other? Or is there concurrence? Or if you could say something.
You are riding shift for the first times. It's a bit strange sometimes. It makes fun, sure, on the bike to ride over the streets, but also you don't have much contact. In the restaurant, it's just pick up the food, hello, goodbye, thanks, and also if you visit the customer and give them the food. And also with the colleagues, it's just superficial talks in front of the restaurants if you got time. A lot of colleagues, we've got a lot of foreigners there, and they are under pressure. And they say, sorry, I have to work, even if you wear the same outfit. So it's hard to bring them together. But a lot of couriers, they wait actually only that you talk to him or her. Hey, look at our campaign, Fight for 15. Do you want to join us? And they are glad that something can happen and something can change. And that's the point of view from the worker. The point of view from the company is, we have really, they are actually technology companies. So they never wanted this fleet. For strategic and marketing reasons, they needed to employ such a fleet, because Deliveroo started with sending bike couriers all over the streets, and they said, oh no, it really can be done. When they bring their own bikes, their own smartphones, and so on and so on. And they never wanted this fleet, so they keep everything in very tight conditions that the people don't know what's happening actually.
Right. Any questions from the audience? If not, I would have another one. Because when you say that there's a lot of foreigners working in these jobs, one thing that comes to mind for me is also, because if they are from different countries, I could also imagine that barrier of getting in touch with each other and really showing solidarity being even more difficult and more extreme. Maybe also in general, do you feel that racism plays into these dynamics?
It is, let's say, it's not active racism. The company and the managers, they are really nice persons, but they make market analysis and say, our couriers are foreigners, and we made bad experience with the German colleagues who found work councils and say, hey, we've got the opportunities here. So they like to have a lot of foreigners in this business, but also other people don't do this work because the barriers of entry, they are so low. You only need to talk English, then you have to get a bike somewhere and a smartphone everyone has in the pocket, and then you can apply and go for your first shift.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That would have been another question. Why do you think there are so many foreigners working in these jobs? But yeah, that makes a lot of sense that it comes from structural racism. Any questions? Yes. There's a microphone heading your way.
Oh, okay, sorry. I was just curious about when you're taking initiative to gather and lead people to a common goal. Obviously, they might be motivated to participate, but you might, but they want to know a timeline or know when they're expected to see a result. And I'm imagining that this path to the fight for 15, to getting the rights that they wanted, was not exactly a straight line. I'm imagining that there were a lot of bumps and setbacks, and probably it took a lot longer than you expected. So I'm curious as to how you maybe dealt with those challenges, and maybe even presented them to the people who you're just trying to gather, who are just there to, join the fight. But I know that people are very easily discouraged, or when they're fighting for something and they get a big hit, then they're like, okay, well, that was a fun try. Why should we try again? So how did you approach those challenges as the primary leader, I assume, of the group? Thanks.
Yeah, our main approach is at first to organize the colleagues who are really depending on the job, like families, fathers or mothers who have to do this job because they don't find anything else suitable, or workers who really do very much hours every week, so because they know the problems. The mini-jobber is actually not in our scope, because the mini-jobber writes 8 hours and says, hey, it's fun, fine, I get my 450 euros, that's it. But so we try to organize the ones who need help and who has to be organized. And then to leave a positive examples for the others, hey, we can obtain more, we can get more out of the company. And you're right, in the past we had a lot of colleagues who left the company then because of high fluctuation, but not because we were not active, only because they have got better opportunities.
Yes, another question from the audience.
So you said there are laws, but not everyone abides by them, and you were doing a lot, you were working on them, but I was wondering, do you feel like the laws that we have were enough and you just needed to have a lot of pressure for them to abide by the laws, or do you feel like because Lieferando and Delivery Hero are different kind of company, there would be a need for new laws to make your struggle easier?
Could you repeat again? Sorry, I didn't get everything.
So I'm wondering, do you feel like we need new laws for unions and worker councils because Lieferando is different from, I don't know, ThyssenKrupp or RWE? Or do you feel like the laws are enough, but we need the companies to follow them more? What do you think, new laws or just following them?
We already have laws who are very good actually because they had a broad scope. But these companies, they present themselves in front of courts like so special that the laws cannot be applicable to them. And we always have to prove it's applicable to them. It's not very much else than in 19th century, for example. And, but this is always a fight for every topic. For example, the Work Council by law has the right to get in contact with the workers and the employees. And this is for our task. The riders are always working in other schedules and they are distributed all over the city. And to get them together or inform them is really hard because the company uses private emails. And now we got a court case. What's ranked higher, the data protection, because it's private email addresses, shall the Work Council get them, or the Work Council, the Works Constitution Act, does the Work Council needs these email addresses to do their tasks, and we need them. But this is a court case then. But we need new regulations, that's true. But to be honest, which new ones, we're still finding out a bit. With every court case, with every arbitration committee, we make some experience, we put that on the list. For example, for the so-called Works Constitution Act renewal law, we made some contributions to that, but it's still not enough. So we're working also on European level with the European Trade Union Confederation, and by the end of the year there will be a directive for platform economy. It's still not the biggest step, but this is what I meant with you need a long breath. Things aren't done by tomorrow.
Semih, I'm afraid we have to close now. Thank you so much for sharing your story and for answering all of our questions. If you still do have questions, please still ask them. Semih is going to be around the entire day, so I was talking to him earlier and he said that he would be very happy to answer any question in person or to have conversations. So thank you so much. I would now like to introduce I would now like to introduce the two other guests that we are gonna listen to now. They are both performers, choreographers, and educators, and they both worked with Sasha Waltz on a very interesting performance. One of them is Suárez Gómez, and the other one is Zaratiana, Randrianantenaina. I hope I got it wrong. I was really practicing hard. I'm sorry. Maybe you can do the right pronunciation later on. They will first show us a video of the performance they've been working on, and later on say something about the context, and then you can also ask your questions like just now. The video will be shown in the back, so please everyone turn around.
Good morning, good afternoon, everybody.
Hello.
Thank you for receiving us. We are very honored to be there. I'm Zaratiana, Randrianantenaina, and this is my friend and colleague Joel Suárez. We are both Berlin contemporary dancers based in Berlin and participated in the creation of the piece you just saw, the trailer you just saw. It might seem a bit abstract to see this video it's a very short extract, and we see nice dancers and colors moving in space. And we are here to kind of explain why this piece is actually a very interesting social exercise from inside. So to give it a context a bit, we created this piece in November. We started in November 2020 in times of very restrictive rules for everybody. And the piece is on the music in C from Terry Riley, composed in 64, and it's a minimalistic piece. We are implementing the musical rules inside the choreography. Therefore, this piece becomes structured improvisation, and Sasha likes to call it a marriage between composition and improvisation. The rules of the music is that the performers are given 55 phrases that they can play freely, each instrument, and repeat and leave the phrases freely, repeat and loop it as much as they want. With one only condition is to never be 5 figures away from each other. It means that if Joel is in phrase 1 and I'm in phrase 5, 6, I cannot move further until he decides to move to 2. So that's the basic rule of the music. Now, we have other rules because, of course, in dance, we are also entitled to be responsible of the space. So we had to create also spatial figures. And actually, we are in the process of still making a lot of things around it, but we have 53 other space figures that we are free to apply individually or to decide individually, the same like the musical phrases or the dance phrases that we created in the same model than the music, to use them inside it, and therefore we compose then the space together. I don't know if I am being explicit enough. Joel, you want to add something?
No, just no, nothing to add. So in the practice, to talk a little bit about the practice, we arrive to the stage and we start with the first figure and we basically don't know what is going to happen. At least in the beginning of the first 2-3 figures. And once the piece starts to fly, then this instant direct dialogue between the individual and the group starts happening. And it happens instantaneously, this game of roles and responsibilities that is very much interconnected and interdependent from each other. For example, if I find myself being in the the first figures, meaning the back of the piece, we call it, with you two, and you two decide to jump to the next figure, that means that I'm gonna be left behind, dealing with the back of the piece, which is an important role because, as Sarita said, it defines also the distance that we have between each other. So for as long as I don't jump then to the next figure, then the person in the front, the leader, cannot move on. But then also is the group defining what I do. It works like both ways. If the group decides to move, then I have to follow through with the decision of the group. Yeah.
Yeah, so to go back to this idea of why it's demanding and it becomes a social exercise is that we really have to take, to make a harmonious or senseful composition space-wise as a group without communicating vocally to each other beforehand. What are we going to do now? We are going to do a nice line, or we are going to do this and this and this. So everything is about listening and trying to make, trying to come together. And how do we do that without language? What's nice inside it, though, is that we come equally. I mean, the rules are very demanding themselves without speaking of the group first. As an individual, you have to deal with so much. There is the counts, there's like the space awareness of already within what you have to do with yourself. Where are my colleagues? There's 5 different figures in space. Can I recognize all of them? And then what decision I take, what decisions they take, how can I help the space to be clearer, how we help each other, are we conscious enough to be able to help each other, how from one individualities we come to a common agreement, and how does this happen is very, very demanding from inside. Yeah.
It is hard work. But for as long as we train for this listening and this awareness, and the better we get with it, then the solution sort of show themselves to you. You know, it's this dialogue between personal wishes and what you have to do, because I am responsible for the space in that moment.
And I'm responsible for the group and for the composition and for myself, and each of our decision impacts the other one and the group itself, actually, yeah.
Thank you so much for introducing us to this very interesting concept. For the audience, if you have any questions, please raise your hand like before. If not, I'm going to ask you a few questions. I think for me, it's interesting to hear about these rules, and you were saying it's very demanding to apply to the rules. Did you have to get used to it, and does it still come natural to express yourself individually in all of this process, and do you find a kind of flow at some point and a sense of freedom within rules, or how would you say that? I mean, because we are here on a conference about democracy, of course, I guess that's what a lot of people connected to. Like, there are rules in a society, there are rules in a democracy, and quite a lot of them, but also they give you this structure within you, which you can move, and also a sense of orientation. Do you also see these parallels between society or between democracy and the way that you engaged in this piece?
Of course. How do we treat rules inside it? Where do we find freedom? I mean, to imply the rules is by itself a very hard exercise. We had to practice a long time before we arrived to an equal knowledge, like that we can really come from a base knowledge that is like the same for every one of us, how much time it took us, and to understand them, and why. It took a while to ground this base knowledge for everybody. The rules by themselves, at first, for me at least, they were a bit. You don't feel free at first, because of course it's complicated and you don't understand why you cannot just enjoy alone your phrase or meet whoever you want and spend a nice time stuck in one phrase with your partners. And at first, yes, it's a bit, you feel a bit restricted. And through performing the piece and practicing it, actually, I got to understand at least actually the group, once it functions or when it works within these rules, there is moments that you find freedom, of course, and openings into new meetings or things that were not planned, that they are magical, and this by themselves is like very, like it's the creative moment, it's the free moment, and within this frame, it's happening, and it makes it magical even in time when it happens. And also, I think as the group practices, like the more you get to know it, actually, the more you can support each other's freedom as well. Mm-hmm. Because sharing and going through all these roles, being the last, the first, the linker, someone also the one who creates chaos, it happens, but we are all imperfect on this, and this, we are all imperfect, very simply. And we all go through all that state. All of these, I think we've been once. We share all these qualities, leaders, followers, linkers, harmonizers, and so on. And to understand each other's position inside it makes it easier to understand each other, and therefore to support each other's decision.
It's also our rules. We understand the piece as also a structure that becomes a common ground to share knowledge and to make a traffic of knowledge. But that knowledge is not given. I mean, we are a group of experts of the same field, and we have more or less the same knowledge being danced. But what happens when we bring this structure, this system to a group of people that have a completely different knowledge? So then rules have to be found again and talked about and discussed again.
And actually, our rules are evolving as we do the piece, and still today there's rules that are applying. Actually, one of the 53 figuration is make your own rules and share them. So as we do it, we find new strategies or new group strategies or new tools of how, it's basically like coming back to this restriction. It can be restrictive, but it becomes also tools of coming together. So it's like how do we, what are our tools of understanding each other or of composing the space together?
I have one question that I wanted to ask you since I saw that you were part of this panel. But still, I want to give the option for the audience. If you have any questions, please raise your hands. Because I was just wondering, when you got invited to this conference, did you think, like, yeah, of course we are invited because this is so obvious that this is a democratic process? Or did you think, like, oh, that's interesting that we are supposed to speak here? Like, did it come naturally? Did you see yourself in this context? And also, while preparing the choreography, were you connecting it to it being a political act or being a democratic act? Did you think in these terms?
When we were invited here, I mean, we are very, I think, all of us conscious that it's clearly how do we find freedom and how do we take common decisions in a restricted or within rules and a structure. So this, by itself, I think we know that it's linked to this. I, as a dancer, that I'm not sure when we started this creation that it would bring us in such questions or that it would lead us to such a practicing democracy or democratic context. As I didn't thought it would bring us in that. The practice of it would bring us in this state. But I also think, though, that on the side of the choreographer, I think it's very obvious. The more I think about it, I think it's not anything coincidence. It's kind of replicating what we were living at these times, which is how do we, as irrelevant sphere of society, continue to, within these restrictions, still find freedom and use creativity to produce. And the piece is exactly about this. It's about how do we come together, how do we find together within restrictions. And yes, and then to complete it, then she also gives this space of the group actually being in charge of the composition. So the show is never the same. She's not in control of that.
Yeah, and also the question, what do we do with what we do? It's not just the piece, but also very early on the piece, I mean, how it was conceived, how to work on the piece. We were not all in the studio the whole time. One of us, of the original group that created it, was working from her house and somewhere else, another country. She could not be with us because of Corona, but still she was included and part of the process. And yeah, we came up with this system of tutorials also for the piece to have a reach beyond being the studio.
As that we are here also to include all our colleagues that couldn't travel and keep on working together, and yeah, it's a crisis. So very practically, it was a great tool to keep in touch, work together in distance, and yeah, keep on working also, because otherwise, no one has a job.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you two so much for sharing your story and for making all of us very curious about this piece. You just shared before we were talking when you will show this piece again. I heard it was on the 10th, 11th and 12th of December. You can see the piece here in Berlin, right? On the 12th it's even streamed as well, as I heard. Yeah, so anybody, of course, is welcome. If you have questions, like I said, the two of you are also very open to answer them afterwards, but for now, there will be a break, and I thank everyone also for listening to us, and yeah, wish you a nice rest of the day. Joel, you didn't get water.